Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Great to see everybody. You know, it's that, I call it, it's a great time of year, but it's a funky time of year between Thanksgiving and Christmas time. But also, it's a great time for folks to get together. There's many opportunities, networking events, gatherings. So if you are in transition, or even if you're in that seat, you know, what Jim just said, keeping that network going is extremely important, and this time of the year is a great time to do that. I'm John Leacani. I'm Managing Director with the Overture Group, and I'm here with my colleague Mike Conti. The Overture Group, we're an executive and professional search firm, and our focus is working with a lot of privately held and mid-sized businesses here in the Midwest. We do work in the areas of accounting and finance, operations, HR, and technology. But 65% of all the work that we do is in accounting and finance. And we personally, at the Overture Group, place between 2 to 3 controllers and CFOs a month at our clients. So when we're talking about controllers and CFOs in that market space, we have our finger on the pulse. Personally, I've been doing search for 20 some odd years, but I've really focused the last 15 plus in the controller and CFO world. Prior to starting the Overture Group 5 years ago, I came from McGladrey, which is now RSM. I spent 10 years there. I worked with Steve there, and by the time I left, I was in charge of the executive search practice. So the stuff that we're going to talk about today is from my experiences and Mike's experiences over our careers. So Mike?
Yep. I'm Mike Conti. To give you a little bit of background on myself, I've worked in search starting right around the heart of the Great Recession. So when people ask me how the market is, I say it's awesome because it's significantly better than, just keeps getting a little bit better. Prior to that, I studied finance. I worked for Wells Fargo shortly before, I worked in the subprime arm of Wells Fargo shortly before the subprime crisis. So right around that time, as my position and division was eliminated, I started working in professional search, worked on accounting and finance roles, and then started working with the Overture Group about 4 years ago, where I helped John on some of the finance executive search, as well as head our professional search, which supports the finance and accounting executives with the various managers and professionals that would make sense for those roles. That's good. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. And I speak to John. This presentation is geared towards companies, and we have tried to tweak it to give you a dual view to make it useful for people that are in transition to job seeking. And then once again, most of you, and like I said, probably all of you in this room, will be in a position of hiring people in the future, so it's good to know the benefits on both sides.
Yeah, if you want to put the slide. Our audience today is folks in transition, but also to give you kind of a perspective of what it's like on the other side and what a good process looks like. How many folks do we have here in transition? Just show hands. How many sitting CFOs or controllers do we have? Okay, so good. So you guys are going to walk out of here as well with some nuggets, hopefully, that we give you today. All right, what are our objectives today? What we want to do is minimize your risk of accepting an offer at the wrong company. Okay, we want to show you what some red flags are. All right, we want to increase the probability of finding that great job. All right, but we also today want you to walk away with some tools. All right, and some of those tools are in the recruiting process, but also something that is near and dear to our heart at the Overture Group. We're going to give you some tips on onboarding, because a lot of companies don't do good onboarding. All right, and when we get to that section, if a company doesn't do onboarding, we'll give you some tools that you could write your own onboarding plan, and maybe even incorporate that once you get into that organization, making that a way of life. And also, I wanted to hopefully we get through in enough time where we have Q&A, because I want to really keep this free flowing. And if you have any questions throughout our presentation, stop, ask. This is how we learn, and this is how we learn as a group. We learn from each other, from our experiences as well. Okay? All right. Before we get started, I want to go around the room And I wanna know what you guys are seeing. What are some of the biggest hiring mistakes you've seen by companies? Or mistakes that you've made yourself in the process? What are some of those?
They didn't hire me.
You know what? We'll show you our top 10 list. That's number 1. They didn't hire Rich. That's good. What else? Yeah, here.
I hate to admit it, but on a resume that I got for a senior accountant a number of years ago, there were 2 typos, and I kind of glossed over it. What a mistake that was,
Yeah.
because of all kinds of things. So I'll never hire anybody or...
Did they have typos?
Absolutely, I mean, that's the most
thorough.
important document in the
Yep.
recruiting process, right?
Yeah, be thorough. You gotta be thorough with that. In all of your documents, that's who you are, right? That's your presentation. Yeah, John.
Can bring the wrong cows, and I see a smaller company hires a large company person, and it's just not a fit.
Cultural fit. Yeah, that's a good one.
And they, from the company side, just rushing to hire. They have an open position, they're worried about it, and they just rush. They hire the first person they think can do it without really doing an accurate search.
Well, the other thing is that we all go and interview with a lot of people
Yeah.
and no feedback.
Right.
That reflects on those people as well,
Yeah.
because what goes around comes around.
Absolutely. Because you never know. You never know, and it's very frustrating when you don't get that.
Right,
Jim?
that's basically my point. We hired a person that, we had a real hard time getting callbacks for the references, and that should have been a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Janine, you had something?
I hired a girl, I did it off of the staffing person's, the staffing company's resume of that person, did not seeing her actual resume. And on the top of her actual resume, I looked at it like 3 months later, because I had just filed it, because I already hired her. Her email address was remarkable one.
Yeah.
I was like, not so much.
No, and that's a red flag, and I think that gets back to how we present ourselves. Because in our search, you know, presentation and professionalism is extremely important, and when you don't do that, that's a red flag for the hiring manager, absolutely.
Want to say it?
Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, they don't necessarily do a good job of fleshing out the specifications of the job.
Mm-hmm.
A very quick story is
Yeah.
years ago, we worked together,
Yeah.
called on a small company, and I started asking questions. He needed to do any M&A expansion, things like that, mergers and acquisitions. And he said, why do you ask? I said, well, I don't know if he want me to find someone who specifically had that.
Yeah.
He said, well, I told you I need a CPA, so aren't I getting that experience?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
obviously, they
No.
don't know what they don't know.
That's exactly right, and we'll show you in our presentation how important it is to be able to flush out those specifications ahead of time, so you don't go down the wrong path hiring the wrong person. That's extremely important. Anybody else? Well, those were some good ones. Well, we're going to show you what we see.
And you guys hit, I mean,
Yeah,
probably
which
these
is
really,
great.
right? Like,
Yeah. You know, somebody said that the number one, you know, need to fill the job quickly. They focus so much on the technical aspects, they miss the most important. Do they fit in our organization, right? And you have to be able, when you're in search, you have to be able to make that determination. Do I fit the culture also of the organization? And that's number 2. Failure to assess the cultural fit. I get back to that. My partner told me, he goes, that you hire people for, you know, what they know, but you fire them for who they are. Think about that, right? So that goes into cultural fit. It goes on both sides, the company hiring side and the candidate side. All right, when you're in transition, a lot of times you're like, this is a great opportunity, but have you flushed out, are you the right fit? And vice versa. If this person has all the tech, and they're a CPA, they've got M&A experience, but you know, they came from a Fortune 500 company, and now they're working for my $15 million company. You know, different types of, you know, a culture there. And is that a cultural fit? There's another red flag. When a company is not willing to share information with you, that sends up a red flag. Most of you in the room are controllers and CFOs. I would never accept a job unless I saw maybe the last 3 years of audited financials, maybe the financial reporting package. I would never do that. And if a company's not willing to share that with you, then of course you have to be willing to sign an NDA. red flag definitely goes up. Internally, they don't have a good recruiting process. If you see a company that doesn't have a good process in place to hire somebody or bring somebody on board, that sends up a red flag. How organized are they? All right, or did they take the time?
It's a red flag, but it's very common.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad position. Hopefully, this could help you with understanding what to look for, and then how to drive it on your end to still figure out that information.
Yes.
Because that's what's key is, as a job seeker, to be able to determine, is this the right role and organization for me?
You have to take responsibility for your career, right? And if you see these red flags, you have to flush that out. Another one, the hiring manager always leaves it up to human resources. You're talking to human resources more during the process than you're talking to the hiring manager. Think about that. It's a red flag, right? They don't take ownership of the position. How many of you worked in a company where, HR will handle that, right? Poorly defined job spec. They haven't taken the time to define the job specification, which is extremely important, right? They didn't have a sourcing strategy to find the right person. They didn't know what to do. They're not checking your background. The company's not checking my background or doing reference checks. It's like, well, I mean, how many other people in the organization did they not do background and reference checks for? You don't know who you're sitting next to. That needs to be flushed out. That's a red flag to me when they don't do that, right? Just looking for employee candidates. You know, employers limit their field when they're just looking for folks. And I can't tell you how many times I sat across from a client and I'm going over the job specification and they say, don't send me anybody in transition. And I always say, okay, let's take a step back and let's talk through this. Because I think you're limiting your talents in your candidate pool by doing that. Being very narrow and very short-sighted by not looking at the best available person for the opportunity.
That'll be a great theme, is try not to eliminate pools of people that might have the best candidate in them for arbitrary reasons.
Also, companies taking too long. Yeah, Dan.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How often do you hear that from companies that they don't want? Is it 80%? Is it 70%?
If you were to ask me 5-6 years ago, the percentage was higher.
90%?
Before the recession, yeah, it was very high. I think employers have become more open to finding that. It also depends on the company too. If they had long-term employees and they have very low turnover, a lot of times those companies tend to only say, hey, I'm looking for folks that are working right now, nobody in transition. But to answer the question, I think that percentage has lowered since the recession. That's a great question. And last but not least, companies taking too long to make a hiring decision, right? What's going on? If they're taking this long to hire somebody after they've seen a number of folks in the process, what is it going to be like to work in that organization if I need to get things done? So, yes, Steve.
I don't see up there, so
But-
another one like that would be just poor interviewing skills.
Yeah,
Not just by the candidate, but
Yeah.
interviewers at the company.
that's excellent. That's part of our, when we talk about process, don't be surprised when you interview with a company, you interview with folks that they're not great interviewers. Because a lot of them are not skilled or they're not trained. Okay?
And that's not only just probing the questions they ask the candidate, but even things that they say to try and entice the candidate. If they don't say anything there, they lose the candidate.
Absolutely.
Actually, to follow up on your point about the previous financial statements, I once, early in my career, made the mistake of following an ex-boss who recruited me, said, Rich, you're the guy, I want to still work with you, this new position he went to, and I trusted him implicitly, accepted the new job. Literally the first day on my job, the auditors came in and said, here, we want to share with you the opinion we're working on, and it was a going concern opinion. I had no idea. I had all this trust in my ex-boss. The good news is I hadn't burned my bridges. Literally within 2 weeks, I was back on my old job.
Sharing that information, getting that information ahead of time before you accept an offer. And at your level and the positions you're going after are extremely, extremely crucial. That's all I'm going to say about that. It's a very important step in the process.
My wife was very angry with me when I came home that day.
I'm sure.
You know,
I'd be angry with you. I'm angry with you just hearing the story.
I was young, like I said, I was young.
But we learn, right?
Yes, and we share.
Yes, we do. That's how we learn.
Yeah, I'd say, speaking of wives, my wife got something, one time I took a position with somewhere, and then we found out who the lead investor was, and she said, oh my God, he's with senior tax guy Arthur Anderson. The woman called him pig face, and long and short, he later went to jail for being too aggressive with the numbers. Now, she would have said, don't touch that position at all.
Due diligence.
But, you know, never would have thought.
And that's another thing too, not doing your due diligence, you know, on an opportunity and talking to a number of folks. If you're interviewing for an organization, I mean, we're very lucky with some of the tools that we have today, making sure we're talking to past employees too that have worked there, so you get a good feel. And also trying to find, especially your hiring manager, who's connected to your hiring manager in your network that you would talk to.
But just one question on due diligence, if you don't mind. What do you think about Glassdoor? Do you think that information is credible? Is
Go ahead,
it
Mike.
a collection
We talked
of,
about that.
you know,
We talked about that last week.
malcontents?
Well, again, it's one piece, right? And like most review sites, right, you know, it's often the people on there are sort of the angst-ridden individuals for a variety of reasons. And I'll share one story. A client I just worked on, before we were meeting with them, I go on Glassdoor and there's just negative reviews. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I tell them, good companies aware of it often. And they said, oh yeah, we know about that. We're pretty sure why it happened. And what they had, because of the larger business strategy, they had to exit a business unit. And they said we had to get rid of this business unit and lay off people that were, you know, they were good employees and it was a good, healthy business unit, but from a big picture strategy, it didn't make sense. And they're like, that at the same time is where the majority of those negative posts came from. So if it has a good story, I think you should know about it, ask about it, and then if there's a good reason behind it, you know, you sort of take it as a whole big picture.
You know, if you're down the road in the interviewing process and you're at offer stage, or you're coming up to offer stage, and you read some of those, bring it up with the hiring manager. Can we discuss some of these? Get the real story.
Yep. Okay, so everyone in this room is a finance professional. So it's
Put some numbers in.
let's put some numbers. Yeah, let's put some financial impact of a bad hiring decision, the cost of hiring a bad employee. As you could, well, actually these are sort of tough to read, but you can see as you move to an entry-level employee up to your C-suite and executives, the proportionate cost grows exponentially. And if you break down the cost into two major areas, hard costs, which are easier to quantify, where you have the actual compensation package that you paid the individual that didn't work out, as well as the cost of sourcing, recruiting, interviewing from the managers on your team, training, technology, licenses costs, tech support, all those costs, you sort of quickly come up with a pretty big number for all employees. And then the exponential growth comes in more of that soft cost. It's a little bit harder to quantify, but the higher you go up, the more value you're expecting from that role. And it's sort of like an opportunity cost thing where you hire the wrong person, it's what could have been, or the actual, you know, if you hire the wrong person at a manager level, director level, all of a sudden that team from a, you know, doesn't fit your culture, you start losing what were good team members. They might hire people that aren't a good fit, and it just starts has a ripple effect. And then at the highest level, it could become, like it could be a fatal mistake where you hire the wrong president or CFO, and it's the difference between a healthy, growing, profitable business strategy and bankruptcy. You know, so it's.
And also the culture. Think about it. How many times have you worked for a company where they've gone through multiple presidents and they've made bad hires? Or if you're the controller, you've gone through multiple CFOs. What type of message are you sending in the organization by constantly making these bad hires And there's a number of companies out there today that I see, because I see a lot of openings, where you're like, this is open again.
Yeah.
They're just not getting it. And what is that doing for those employees in the organization in terms of, when we talk about cost, it's the cost of company reputation, right? You want to minimize that risk by having a good process in place and hiring the best people.
So, with it being expensive, it's obviously important to have a good recruiting process. And on the flip side, as an individual who's a job seeker, yeah, it's important to be able to know what that process should look like, so you could identify it. Because I think we'd agree that it's also costly to take the wrong position as a job seeker for your big term, long-term career prospect, both mentally, like a mental and stress value, as well as financially. So it's important for a company to have a good process, and that process is going to vary slightly from your entry-level employees to your executives, but it's good to have a template and framework that you could tweak for any role in your organization. And I know it's hard to see here, but the top bullet is needs assessment, having a needs assessment, and the second bullet is a job description and a success profile of the individual you're looking for.
And we'll get into some of these.
Yeah, John will talk specifically, I think, later on about what that success profile will look like, how to use it. But I think so those top two bullets that I mentioned are very crucial, and often where everything goes wrong. And really that top one drives that second bullet. So your needs assessment is that meeting, and I guess we'll start with what it typically looks like. And where I think it goes wrong is the hiring manager throwing out credentials that he wants for this person. So they'll say, I want a CPA, I want an MBA, a Big Four accounting experience, et cetera. And with those three, those are very common ones. And they're also commonly thrown on finance and accounting jobs for arbitrary reasons. There's nothing wrong with any of those accreditations. I think a lot of people in this room are probably CPAs. But what you should do, it's like that, what John said, limiting your pool. So the best candidate you have may not be a CPA, and a CPA is not crucial for them in that role. If it's a manager of a public accounting firm, make them have a CPA. If it's an accounting manager, controller, whatever it is, and that CPA is not required to be a high-functioning person in that role, don't limit yourself to that certification. Think about why you want that CPA. You want it because somebody's disciplined, they were smart enough to take and study for that test, and disciplined because it's a long and hard process. But that's what you're looking for. You're looking for those characteristics. And there's other things they may have that show those exact same characteristics that you're looking for. So your needs assessment is key. Instead of just throwing out certifications that are limiting the pool of people you're looking at, start with the question of what will this person be doing day to day, the big projects, key initiatives, what are the things that this person will be responsible for that we need them to be successful at for this hire to be successful.
How important is the distinction between skills that are required versus preferred?
So that's a real good question. And you could take some of those certifications that you wanted for good reasons. And because they are still pluses or preferred. So I would say it's a very big distinction. It's sort of semantical of how but it's a big distinction. And when you're putting together that job description and you're giving it to the person who's then going to source, because you don't want them to eliminate good people. So they have an understanding of why. So if you in that job description and success profile, you list the characteristics and things you would like them to have done successfully in the past, it should hopefully alleviate that. And if they have it, like I said, it's still definitely positive to have those credentials.
But, when you're putting together a job spec or a job description, really think about what are you have to make that judgment as a hiring manager, right? And what we're saying here, don't be limited, okay? Also, if you have a cross-section of candidates, which is what you want to see, say a nice cross-section. If somebody says CPA, is a must, but somebody has the requisite experience, put them into the candidate pool, see how they stack up. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on the CPA. So I have an MBA in finance, but I don't have a CPA. And, I find sometimes with some of the, application process, it's merely a checklist, if you will.
Yep.
So, to your point, it's, yes, if it is an auditing or manager or accounting, yes, CPA is a plus, but, sometimes, I guess my question really is how do you get around that? I certainly don't want to apply for a position I'm not qualified for, but if it's a FP&A role or something more finance,
Yes.
so.
There are gonna be some companies that are gonna be sticklers for it.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you don't have it, you gotta move on.
Sure.
I mean, you just have to. But if you can demonstrate your experiences, whether that's through an interview or your written communication for the opportunity, you need to be able to differentiate yourself in a way where that CPA goes from here and it comes down, wow, this person has this, and this experience, which could be equivalent to somebody who has had their CPA. A lot of times what companies look for when they have their CPA is, did they go to the classes, did they take the tests, that was followed through. And they check the box there.
Right.
So, but that's a way I would try to, if I didn't have my CPA, differentiate myself from those who have it. It's my experiences and how I convey that in my communications.
I was just gonna say, part of that is I've managed CPAs. So, I mean, if the CPA is reporting you, you're correcting their work.
Yeah.
I mean, you're pretty experienced in terms
Yeah.
of some of the things.
Mike?
The other thing is, when you're just submitting your resume and somebody's going through the checklist and they don't have it, you get in the wrong pile. The important thing is to network your way into a company.
Yeah,
Where you can sell yourself,
yes.
who you are and
Yeah.
what you are.
That's
It's not always easy.
Yep.
I mean, but if you can try to get away from an online application that is going to be data-driven and look at those credentials and talk to, even if it's an HR, if it's the hiring manager, that's the best. Even somebody in HR, they're people, and I think they're doing their best to find the best possible candidates.
Yeah.
So if you can get a hold of them and talk to them, present well, they'll be excited about you. So.
All right, real quick, why don't we just go through that?
Yeah, so,
Just real fast.
so I said this, top two, the needs assessment, which drives the process, that where it goes wrong, the very beginning, that drives the rest of the process, gets you a good job description, and a good success profile. And then I would say that bottom bullet, which is onboarding, and John will go more in depth with onboarding, but what it is that plan, that tangible plan for that first 6 months, a year, 3 months, that makes sure that the person who is hired is successful in the role that you brought them on for. Those are the top two are the most important. And what's in between, your sourcing, your interview process, like a phone screen, a couple in-person interviews, getting them the right documents and information. John mentioned financial information, your background check and leader assessment. Those are important to have a consistent strategy in the middle. But those are the ones that I think you modify, where the top, that a real good thorough needs assessment, and then to increase your chance of success of that person, the onboarding after you find the right person, those are the two key ones in my opinion.
Do you see from a company standpoint, like we've all heard as candidates how to approach a phone interview, don't be laying on your couch, just be casual. But do you find, do companies take phone interviews seriously? Or they just check the box, the person is breathing and...
Yeah, I would say there's the two types of phone screens. One is, hey, is this person, does it sound like they're on the couch, like sleeping, or outside, the basic one, like this person talks on the phone, answers my questions, it's demonstrated that they're breathing, capable of processing information, that's it. The other one is a little bit more thorough, where it's, tell me about let me make sure you are a good fit. I have your resume. It gives me the idea that you're somewhat there, but let's talk about your experience. It's a little more in depth. It might be a half hour to an hour as opposed to 15 minutes.
I will not bring anybody into my office unless somebody like you referred them to me without spending some time on the phone with them. and it's very important. Because time is important to me, right? I don't want to waste my time bringing somebody in, and then 5 minutes into it, they're not the right person for the position I'm recruiting. John, did you have something?
I was just gonna say, look at how many times you might be recruited by somebody who's out of town, too.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, they're gonna make it,
Yeah.
make or break whether it goes further just based on
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah. And you gotta take phone, you have to take phone interviews very, 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 you have to be very prepared for them.
And
Very serious.
bigger companies or companies in multiple locations and executives that travel, you're gonna have to, the phone and Skype are just, they're part of what's now a necessity to make sure things are timely and you have a good process. So, we mentioned evaluating this process and why it's important, but here are a list of key questions. We'll go into some more. How you could tell, hey, do they have a good process? Are they accurately assessing whether I'm the right fit for them? And then are they providing me information where I can make that assessment as well?
We'll share these. Vince, can we share these with the folks?
Sure.
So make sure you give your business.
Yes, yeah, we were gonna print out, but we didn't wanna.
But these are also
Let's
some
be
questions you
green
can
enough.
ask in the interviewing process as well.
Yeah, and they, hit to specific, so John mentioned that revolving door, which is a definite red flag. If a company has had 10 controllers in 7 years, there's obviously something wrong. And really, there's probably two things it could be. One, the company, there is something wrong with the role in the company and it's toxic. But more likely, they just have a bad process. They're not they're not accurately determining, is this person right for us? So then when you know that, you sort of have to, if you feel comfortable taking that role, you got to do a lot of the work to drive the improvement of that process by asking the right questions. So, start figuring out why. See if they, you know your background, you know what you're good at, sort of reverse it and ask them what this person is going to need to do. Do the needs assessment backwards and talk to the people who are interviewing you on what's important. And then it's sort of easy if you have the right experience to answer the questions that fit that. They should have culture, sort of the soft skills of the individual, and then the cultural and intangible aspects of the role and company are so important. I think John mentioned that earlier. You have to get a feel for that, whether it's by meeting many people and sort of getting candid answers. The Glassdoor, it gives you one perspective. It might be that negative perspective, but it gives you something. Bankers, attorneys, whatever it may be, accountants who have worked with them. Hey, have you worked with this controller or CFO? You've been the owner for a long time. How are they to work with? Getting as much information that's just not on job descriptions is key.
Okay, let's talk about the success profile. The success profile job spec. How many have written a job spec or success profile in their organizations before? Okay. How did you find doing that ahead of time before you engaged finding your person?
Sure.
Good?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because you have to think about what the requirements of the job are going to be without falling in love with a particular individual.
Absolutely. Take a step back, right? A lot of times when an employee leaves our organization or moves on, or we create something in our organization, it gives us an opportunity to take a step back and really do a needs assessment of what is crucial to this position and in this organization. So a success profile, I highly recommend if you're not in the seat or you're getting in the seat and you're going to hire somebody, you write a success profile. And really what that is, it communicates the knowledge, the competencies, history, attributes, really of the position. And who do you share that with, right? Who do you share the success profile with? Potential candidates, internal document for folks who are going to be on your interviewing team, okay? Networking, right? Right? I'm a CFO for ABC company, I'm looking for my controller. I want to take that controller spec and I want to send it out to my network so I can share it there. Okay? Now, one thing I'm gonna recommend before I get into some of the specifics is if you're interviewing for a position and you're in transition, and the position you're interviewing for doesn't have a success profile or a position spec, I'd write my own. As I'm going through the interviewing process, document that. What's the culture like? All right?
Excuse me. So are you using those terms interchangeably, or is there a difference between success profile and job spec?
That same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the job spec and success profile is a little bit different than the job description.
Yeah, the job
Okay, so help
description
me understand
describes
that.
the
Okay.
role.
Yeah, go ahead.
It describes the role that you're looking to fill. It's a description of the job. The spec and the profile are more, they're describing the individual that you're looking for, what it'll be to be the spec of the person that'll be successful. And then also, they are describing the company
Yes.
from a little bit higher level view.
They give the company
culture,
history, get into the culture, the mission, the values. You want to make sure you understand all of that.
But if there was a Venn diagram, there's definite,
Yeah.
there's a healthy portion that overlaps.
Yep, very much so. Right.
So taking off on your comment about writing your own,
Yes.
if they don't have one.
Yep.
Broadly, do you encourage candidates to deviate from the norm if they have something to present? Do you think that makes them more appealing more often than not?
Yes, it could. Right? It can hurt you, but it also can help you. You have to make sure you know when to do that. It's very important. After the first interview, maybe not, right? But once you start getting into the process and you're starting to communicate, and you're going, you're getting to the ultimate goal of offer that you're, the opportunity you're interested in, maybe you want to share that. These are the notes that I've taken from in the interviewing process that I've learned in the organization. And you share that with the hiring manager. Let's talk about some of these. I think sharing that shows that you're listening, all right, that you're following up and you're following through. I mean, those are all great core competencies that employers look for in their candidates.
Because if you remember, Steve made a good point about the person, maybe an owner says, you're asked, hey, does this person need M&A experience? And say, well, yeah, I said a CPA. They might not know. So they put together that spec the best they could, but there's a lack of understanding of the financial profession that you could help fill in. And then they're smart people. If you help them understand it, it'll solidify you as the right person for that role. Dan?
So you go through and you do all your due diligence, and you got all these red flags, let's
Yep.
say, and-
Run.
Yeah.
Run, there's a door, run.
Was that your advice? I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of people.
You have to do risk assessment, right?
If they're out
Everybody
of
in this-
work 3 months, 5 months, and, everybody's kind of, I can fix it. I'm willing to give it a shot. What is the percentage of that working? Is it 0 or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a low percentage, it's gonna work. And a lot of times when we get in transition, it's like, I got this opportunity, I better, either that or I'm gonna be out another. Think about that. I mean, I'm gonna go into a company that's not the right fit for me. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, with the experiences that I've seen, because they're not doing their due diligence up front. They take a took and within 3 months they're calling me back saying it didn't work out. Why? Right now, there's 4 individuals I know that took an opportunity that were out within 6 months. I want to have kind of a debrief with them, and do a case study on that. What did they do? And I would like to ask them some of these questions.
That's why I asked.
Absolutely.
I know.
But Dan's question was subtly different. He did the diligence, but he took the job anyway.
Now, he did, but he went against probably what his findings said that he shouldn't have taken that position, right? Right?
Yeah.
He took the risk.
But I think you gotta go back to, is it a bad role? Or is it a bad process that you could do the due diligence and then make the determination, I am the right person, or, they know?
I'm just curious, because you can talk
Yeah.
your way, if you're been out of work for 6 months, that
Oh,
says,
yeah.
It's
okay,
so easy to do,
here's this
but
red flag, and I've covered that with the owner. or whatever.
It's a lot
Cover your
easier,
ass.
it's a lot easier to talk about it than to be in your shoes in
any red
transition
flags
and
that
make
come
that
up-
decision.
Any red flags that come up in the interviewing process, if you're not talking about that after, you know, right before the offer or when you get the offer, I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not asking those tough questions. Steve?
I was gonna say it also helps to really lay out the expectations up front. A lot of the
Yep.
profiles and specifications they don't get into, certainly in the job description, they don't necessarily say what's expected of the individual in that first year.
Well, no, that's real important, Steve, and that goes to one of the key bullets in our success profile is, and I like to ask this question, what are the key initiatives? What are the key projects? You as a hiring manager, if you were to sit back 18 months from the time I hired that new CFO or controller, what would I have accomplished? Right? What would that controller or CFO accomplish? Okay? Now you can also start tying that into performance management, and we'll talk about with the onboarding. We do that in our onboarding plans. But you want to know what some of those key initiatives. Also, that can make that position a little bit more attractive too, and that's a good way to sell the opportunity, are certain key projects. Maybe they're doing a systems implementation, or they need another round of funding, or they're recapitalizing their company. You know, listing those out. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what the success profile looks at like. But if I'm writing a success profile, there's just real quick, you might want to write this down, very, very simple. This is a great way to define, especially if you're doing a replacement. Say if you're doing a replacement for a controller or a financial executive, CFO. And before I hire somebody, I want to ask these questions. What was that person doing that I want them to continue to do? Okay? What were they doing that I want them to stop doing? And what weren't they doing in their role that I want them to start doing? Think about those three questions. Think about that. I think that really helps define a role as well, if you're writing a success profile in your organization. All right. Talk about the front end work before we start. So that's it. This is after we develop the success profile, job descriptions. We want to make sure that we do our work on the front end. And when we get into the interviewing process, we want to make sure we have the right people to interview the candidates on your team. So before you bring candidates into the organization, you want to make sure that you've assembled the right team to interview these candidates. And I recommend a cross-section, people they may be interacting with. Because I think that's extremely important, because you want to make sure that they get on the team. They interview with folks they're going to be interacting with a lot. And you want input from others. All right? And also, they'll have different perspectives on the company, so it gives a candidate multiple perspectives. All right? What I think, Steve, you brought this up earlier. Be prepared, because some of the folks that you're going to interview with are not trained interviewers and don't do it all the time. So you need to be prepared for that, okay? You need to be prepared for that. You need to have questions to ask at the appropriate times. You need to know how to bring an interview back on track if it's going south, okay? Has anybody been in an interview with somebody from an organization or a company where it's like, is this an interview? This person, anybody go through that?
Last week.
Last week, what happened?
I showed up, and I was excited and everything. And the one guy brought me into the room. It was the wrong conference room, okay? So he brings me in.
But you were the right guy.
I was the right guy. And there was no structure. You know, it's like, why are you here? He didn't know what the job was, didn't understand the job description at all. I had to like provide it to him. And then about 20 minutes into it, everybody shows up and we get kicked out of the room. You know, because we're in the wrong conference room. So then he takes me over to the Skype, you know, for the New York interview, and the one lady doesn't even speak English. She asked her question 5 times, I still didn't understand it. Then she's doing her phone thing during the interview, and there's 2 of them, then she gets up and leaves. And then we talk to the other lady for another 20 minutes, and then the incoming call, and all the people are coming into that room. Get kicked out of that room. So then we talked about your organizational, you know, all those red flags and all that kind of stuff. And I just went, wow. And then they left me there. They just like, okay, you know, they left. And I didn't know, buddy, you know, usually you kind of get, you know, wow,
Yeah.
you know,
So-
carted around the room.
So they leave you with some water or granola bar or anything? It's like, yeah. But that's my point.
It was
Yeah.
really interesting. Yeah, I learned
That's
a lot.
good.
I learned a lot that day.
You know, that's fantastic, because that really gets into the next couple of bullets here is, you know, the people on the team have to be provided with right information, right? They need to have the success profile. They need to have the job description. Also, they need to have the candidate's resume, right? They need to know who they're meeting with, what skills. And as being on this team, you need to do your due diligence before you bring somebody in. Because that's a terrible reflection on an organization when you had, would you provide them with a job description? What was it?
I had to like, you know, explain like, well, this is, you know, they brought me in for this job here.
Red flag.
And, you know, come on.
That's just,
You know,
that's such a
I
red
felt like
flag.
saying, hey, don't you,
How important did you feel?
I felt pretty good leaving.
Well,
You know, after it was all over, I'm like, I went to the other conference room, I waited for somebody to come and get me. I called the agency, and I'm like, you know, I'm just gonna leave.
yeah, it's not a great reflection. So those are the red flags that you need to look for in the process. And as a
But,
hiring
excuse me,
manager,
My question around that
Yeah.
though, okay, so they don't know how to interview.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But once, you know, how can you tell whether it's still a good job? Just because they're not good at interviewing.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean it's not a good fit or not a good job ultimately.
good question. That's where you have to take ownership of the interview. Remember how many times have you interviewed candidates? You need to be prepared with questions. You need to be prepared with those questions, whether it's two types of questions, accountabilities and responsibilities about the opportunity, and then also talk to them about the company. You know, what strategic direction of the company culture. Ask those questions to engage that interviewer, because again, a lot of them, they're not skilled at that, and you've seen that. But you could get that back on track.
Also, I would say that you want to network and find someone that you know who
Get
knows
the inside
about
story.
that.
Yeah,
about
do
that
your due
company.
diligence.
And they're giving you a lot of information, you know, you're now exposed to their culture, and are you comfortable in that environment? So if you do as much as you can to figure out this is a good role, the organization is healthy, I don't mind working here, can you work with people, you know, hey, people will be on their phones, people, you know, there might be some disorganization within the company. Am I comfortable in that environment? If you are, then you get to determine you're the right fit.
All right.
I was just gonna, real quick, a real poor interviewer, and they're asking you a bunch of questions, and you answer yes or no. If you're just answering, just like yes, you're doing yourself a disservice. For example, what is it, well, you're results oriented, or you're a team player. Well, who's gonna say this? The right answer is yes, for example, and give a great story to back it up. If you don't do that, then you're falling victim to a poor interview.
And that's a good point, Steve. That helps get that untrained interviewer or who's terrible at it. Once you start giving examples, then hopefully you're bringing them into the conversation, and that's what you want to do. All right, let's talk about the interviewing process. First round of interviews, typically we call that the getting to know you, right? The goal for the candidate is in the first interview to get a second interview, right? So that's the goal. But that first interview typically is with the hiring manager, maybe in HR, and somebody else. But that is really what we call the getting to know you. They want to get enough information from you that A, you have the requisite skills, and is there somewhat of a cultural fit in our organization, right? So typically some of the, and again, some companies interview a lot different, but this is kind of the process that we see that's worked really well for some of our clients. Now, once we make the second round, we call the second round the 50-50 day. And you guys might want to take some notes on this, because this is something that we've developed for our clients in terms of that second day called the 50-50 day, especially for controllers, CFOs, and financial executives. Why do we call it the 50-50 approach? Vince, you've gone through the 50-50 approach, right? When we placed you at your company. Because you want to learn as much about the company as the company's going to learn about you. That's the mentality you need to go into in the 50-50 day. Now, typically that could be the second one. interview, or maybe the third interview, or the third time you were there. Typically, what does that look like? Okay? Taking a tour of the operation, especially if it's a manufacturer, you want to take a tour of the operations. Very, very important. Even if it's not a manufacturing or distribution facility, if it's a services company, even just taking a tour around the office, so you give that candidate a feel of the environment. Okay? Now, as a financial professional, this step I think is extremely crucial, and this is where a lot of folks miss the boat. Getting information before you start interviewing with a number of folks in the company. And that's having the company provide you with crucial documents. And what are those? That could be part of a strategic plan, the last 3 years of audited financials I'd ask for, a monthly financial reporting package, org chart, and any other key documents that'll help you gain knowledge of the organization. And typically, you look at those documents for about an hour before you start your interview. Now, you're not going to become real intimate with all of those documents, but at least you get a high level for what's happening in the organization. And of course, signing an NDA and willing to sign an NDA is very important. But now you're armed with some information, so when you're interviewing with some key individuals in the organization, you could start referring to some of the information that you got. Then the next step for the 50-50 day is having a series of interviews with key folks in the organization. Whether that's operations, sales, marketing. Who else did you interview with? The owners, right? Right? So as you're interviewing now, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them because of the information you gained, before you started the interviews. That's why those documents are extremely crucial. So now it becomes less of an interview, right? And more of a business dialogue.
How many companies really will, if you ask them about before you have the first interview, will give you that kind of information?
Before you have it, no. This is the second or third.
Yeah.
But even after that?
Some, Mike, you make a good point. If it's a publicly held company, a lot of that's out there.
Yeah.
But when it's a privately held company, right, and they're not willing to share that information with you, especially if you're going to be their controller or CFO, now at different levels they should provide different information, right? But if they're not willing to do that, that's a red flag.
Yeah, and I think you
works both
mentioned.
ways. I'm on the committee for the CFO of the Year Award.
Yeah.
We have private companies, and we've run the companies.
They don't want to give
They
you
don't
that
wanna give it.
information, right?
But
And that happens.
And that's,
That happens, but there's other information that they could share with you. Board charts, maybe parts of strategic plans, maybe some of the, a presentation that they gave to a key customer, or something like that. I mean, are you giving away the story? No, you're not. They're not giving away the story, but they're arming
There's
that.
probably not many people have ever asked this kind of question.
But you have to,
Right, I understand.
at your
Yeah.
level, and if you
Right.
don't, and that's what I'm getting back to, you're doing yourself a disservice by not asking those questions, because you're not doing the due diligence.
and like 100% of companies aren't going to do this, but this 50-50 or that thorough portion of the interview, the full day, half day, where you're meeting with multiple people, it should only be done with your final ideally two candidates. So hopefully you're one of the final two for the position where it's relevant. You're willing to sign an NDA.
Right.
And even if they won't give you certain, they should be able to talk about certain information. You should know what you're stepping into, whether it's, is the balance sheet healthy, is, how everything. They should give you enough information if they're not willing to share the actual financials.
My
My
experience is they absolutely share that information when you get to that point. That they're, especially if they're any kind of reputable
Absolutely.
operation. You're not only going to get what he talked about, you might even get the credit agreement, you might get their
Those are key documents.
covenant compliance calculated. You'll get a lot of information when you get down to the last stage.
Right.
Doesn't this ground into me presenting myself as a valuable commodity?
Absolutely.
And I'm assessing how good a fit am I for this organization and it for me. I mean, that seems like healthy dialogue, especially to say, I won't give you an org chart. Okay, this is why I want it, right? Let's talk through how else that works.
Absolutely. You're testing whether you're going to be able to work with that owner in the future.
And then the final step in what we call the 50-50 day is you meet at the end of that day, you meet with your hiring manager, and you tell them what you learned. So again, I get back to how do we take an interview from an interview to more of a business dialogue, right? Because that shows a couple things. That shows how am I thinking and what am I honing in on certain key areas in your organization? What am I looking at? How we're going to communicate as hiring manager to new hire. Well, what style? There's a lot that you get out of it by just them even asking, what did you learn today? Open-ended question that could just, it breaks down a bunch of walls. And that's a great way to evaluate both sides. If you're hiring somebody or if you're the candidate, is this the right organization for me?
Does working with a recruiter through recruiter change any of this process for you?
No, it shouldn't.
Makes it better.
I guess I'm just thinking, going through this process and debriefing with the recruiter when I'm done, rather than the hiring manager, for example.
Yeah, it's right. It's a great debrief at the end of the day.
But do it
with
with
them.
recruiting manager, not the...
Absolutely.
Not
Because
the
you
recruiter.
need, that's a mistake I think a lot of candidates put on a recruiter. Okay, we're good. However, if you have that, if you're starting to establish that dialogue with your hiring manager early on, I think that's very, very important. That's setting the ground, communicating directly with them. You say something?
Well, I was gonna say, my guess, and this is just from personal experience.
Yeah.
working
You
with
went through
guys.
this.
Yeah, but, right, well, exactly, I went through this, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I got this, and this is it. And then I know other people we've hired and recruited not going through the Overture Group, we don't do any of this. And so they've actually guided our owners on what they needed to do. Like, we've never shown them, no one, I've been there for almost 5 years, we've hired a number of people, I don't think I've ever shown anybody a financial statement.
Well,
But I saw financial statements when I was in the interview process, and I'm sure it's because John and Bob said, this is what you gotta have for him when he comes in, Not because I was smart enough to ask for it.
but that's,
It gives you, it gives you a medium to maybe, hey, I want this, how can we go about doing it? Should I ask, should you ask, to the recruiter, you can try that. How do you not have time?
we got 10 minutes left, so let's go to the next slide.
So the internal review of your interview and your group who's doing the interviews, the key here is, we mentioned this, a lot of these people aren't trained professional interviewers, meaning the people asking the questions and doing the interviewing. So when you sit and get feedback from them as a hiring manager, you gotta make sure you don't just say no, because I didn't like the person. The majority of hiring at all levels, at all companies, is done based on, was the person I met likable? Their affability, their friendliness, their outgoing, they speak well, they present well, they're attractive. Those are not things that make you good at most role, at being a controller, at being a CFO. So you can't let somebody on the team be like, yeah, I just didn't feel it. If they don't have a reason, if there's no reason, and tell them before they start interviewing, then, and everybody else on the team liked them, really make that person fight to knock them out of the pool. Because you end up losing good people who just weren't, didn't have a firm enough handshake. I'm not saying you shouldn't, those are important things, we tell candidates they need to do it, but they need to do it because that's what you're being judged on, and you shouldn't be judged on all those, those criteria.
And then real quick, going through some of these other things, and these are some high-level things that you do with the debrief. Also be prepared. Homework. You may have to show them work product, which I think is great. And if you have work product, you may want to bring it with you in your tools. So you want to bring it out at the right point in your interview.
Be ready. Don't do it, not your cover letter.
Be prepared for assessments.
Yeah, that's actually a key. So be ready for, there's usually a background check. You're in finance. There can be a credit check. If there's any issues that will come up, bring those up before they run the background check. You're gonna have to use your judgment of when to do it. You don't want to put that on your cover letter. But if you're after the first interview, things progress. You have a second interview. They might, you just may want to say, hey, I just want you to know. you know, whatever it is.
You need to do that. Make sure you don't disclose, because I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen folks actually not even do a background check, and they're on the job 3-6 months, and something pops up, right? Also, make sure your social media is cleaned up, because we check social media. So you go through this.
Yeah, the offer,
Because we did have a whole series
Social
on
media are
this.
you talking about, the candidates or the companies?
candidates, but I think it's.
Candidates,
important
clean
on
up your
the
social
company
media.
side.
And then on the client side, clients are gonna check that, so.
Yeah.
That's a great way to do some due diligence. I go to Facebook, I look at, you've got a Facebook page, all right, I go to LinkedIn, you know, and I just Google candidate. I can't tell you how many times I've found that this one had a judgment against them, or they're in a lawsuit, okay? Let's talk about it. And then I'm gonna present you to my client, what does this mean? Well, we're a publicly traded company, we just merged with somebody. I was named in a lawsuit, you know, that's typical when we acquire a company, and we're working through that, but my attorney's telling me that I'm pretty much in the clean. Okay,
There's
does that
good-
answer the question or no?
Yeah.
Now, as far as the offer goes, it's important for you as a candidate to do your homework. I mean, you could know the market, so when you know, if there's dialogue and negotiation, it gives you some room to ground on, not just, hey, I want X amount of dollars, and, you know, it's less than what they're offering. Know why, you know, understand your background. You can talk to recruiters, you could look for information online. I mean, there's good resources out there for that. Yeah, it's just
I've done an onboarding presentation here last year, a couple of years ago, on onboarding and important onboarding. A lot of companies out there, they don't have a good onboarding process. But our onboarding process is really geared to the controller, CFO, and the financial professional. And basically, what does the onboarding process look like? You may want to take some notes, or we'll get this. First is your basic orientation. That's all the company stuff. I call it all the paperwork, and where's the coffee.
The majority of companies are doing that.
Yeah, and they're doing that part. But the second part of it is really building the company knowledge, okay, and building your company knowledge. And that's getting all the pertinent information that you need. That's scheduling meetings with department heads, getting those key documents ahead of time, okay? That's very, very important in your onboarding process. You're getting enough information in the organization as possible, okay? A lot of that hopefully you got in the 50-50 day, which would be great. But once you're in the organization, right, you want to make sure you get all of it. It's called building company knowledge. And then we go into another phase, which is actually called systems and process. I recommend for the folks in this room that you take a half a day once a week to document the systems that you're going to be responsible for and working with. Not saying you need to take that documentation and do something, but you need to know how the data flows within your system, so you become very, very knowledgeable about it.
And the
Okay?
things that you might not be cutting invoices, but you should, if you're responsible for managing that, somebody else is doing that process, sit down that half day and do it, so now you understand it, you can help them get better at it, you can improve the process, the system.
Also, when problems occur, I can start troubleshooting in certain areas if I have that system knowledge, right? Cuts down a lot of time. Next is your internal relationships. We call them internal relationships. Again, meeting with the key players in the organization, again, to build company knowledge, but also start building relationships that you're going to have internally with those folks, okay? And make sure you define those people ahead of time, who those key folks are in the organization. Next is your external relationships. For folks in the room, your CPA firm, your banker, your accounting firms, your systems providers. All of those folks, you need to know who those are. List them out. Make sure you're meeting with them. And why do you meet with them? So you understand the relationship and the history of the relationship. Are there any things that you're doing for our organization that I should know about now that I'm in the CFO chair? Right? Maybe that didn't come out in the interviewing process. I think it's very, very important. So you start establishing, those external relationships, okay? And then the key thing here, and I think Steve, you brought this up earlier, when we write an onboarding plan, we talk about key initiatives. What are those key initiatives within the first 18 months that I'm going to undertake? All right? And you list those out so you know, come time for review, I need to have hit on these projects or accomplish this. And with the onboarding plan, you're putting timelines on there as well. When do these need to be accomplished by? But by setting those initiatives and those objectives in the onboarding plan, you can start now incorporating that into your performance management. Make sense? And then having a mutual feedback session with your, stop laughing, with your hiring manager on a timely basis. I can't tell you how many times when I do a formal follow-up after we place somebody, and they say, oh yeah, we work together every day. Well, you're putting fires out every day. You're not getting feedback. So I would schedule, whether it's weekly in the beginning or bi-weekly, that you sit down with your hiring manager and have a feedback session. How are things going? Have an agenda. Put some bullet points together before you meet. Take the initiative to do it, because I will tell you, hiring managers probably aren't going to do that, right? All right, we won't pick on you. But that's extremely important that you're having that feedback session, because I will tell you, when we do these, we do 4 to 6 month follow-ups, and a lot of the issues that come up wouldn't even come up if they had a feedback session with their hiring manager on a timely basis.
Once a week, twice every
Once
week.
yeah.
The longer you're there, the less frequent it needs to be.
And then the last thing on the onboarding plan, I highly recommend somebody at your level doing a 6 month SWOT analysis or business observations report. And it doesn't have to be real long. It can be 4 to 8 pages maybe of bullet points. And what you're going to do is you're going to report back to your manager or your hiring manager, owner, whoever. And it's for your eyes and their eyes only, unless you decide there's some things out here that we need to do that you're going to report back on. And that could be company culture, decision making, the strategy of the company, okay, culture. And you're reporting back to them. And you have to capture those observations in the first 4 to 6 months, because after 6 months, you're pretty much ingrained in the culture already. But you have a fresh set of eyes and ears. You're looking at the organization in those first 4 to 6 months as a consultant. And there's a lot of good information that you can glean and get out of the company in those first 4 to 6 months. Because if you're working for a company where the employees have been there a while, you know, that's all they know, you have an outsider's perspective.
In the woods.
Yep, you have an outsider's perspective.
Just to circle back, I know we're running out of time, we want to have questions. John just mentioned the onboarding. From that, the process and what it should look like, either as a candidate starting a new job or when you're hiring again. The onboarding portion is so key to increasing the success of that person being the right, to working out and being productive. And then that needs-based assessment to start with, it's crucial as well. Those are the two, I really think, if you could focus, as a takeaway, if you could focus on those, you will drastically have a leg up on candidates and companies.
We're at 9 o'clock, so any questions before I'm going to have a raffle? Go ahead, Mike.
How many clients did you retain or ask you to say, we'd like to find somebody on a 90-day trial basis versus I'm going to hire this person? Does that come up? Or
It comes up now and then, not real often.
So
I would say it comes up at the lower levels a little bit more than the higher levels.
Yeah, I would say though, if remember Dan's question where he said, hey, what if there's a bunch of red flags? Maybe that should be the candidate's suggestion if there are those red flags that you can't figure out in the process. Like, yeah, I think they'd be up for it. It lowers their risk.
You would be up, you would deal with that.
Yeah.
In certain situations.
We'll deal with it in certain situations, but sometimes, and I look at if you want to do a contract for hire, you're probably needing somebody in transition. I would, if I'm in a chair and I have an opportunity, unless I'm at a point in my career where I can do that, I'm not going to leave something full-time for something that's a contract to hire. But you limit your pool.
Right, that's limiting your pool.
All right. Anything else? Go ahead.
Quick clarification question. So the 50-50, the data, the org chart, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Is this something you expect to get And so you're holding it in your hot hands, and I think it is, but is it like an hour before I meet David?
Yes, that's exactly right. It's an hour
So
before.
you're in the client offices,
Yep.
it's not, you're at home?
No.
Okay.
Now, some clients, I will tell you, that you sign an NDA, they'll give it to you ahead of time. But most of the time, you're in an office, you're in a conference room. And if you, and any hiring managers, if you guys want to walk through this, give me a call real quick. I'll have a high-level conversation with you. Anything else? All right.
Anybody not put their business card in for John?
Here, this
We'll
is what.
send these out, but John's gonna raffle them.
Yeah, what I'm willing to do for anybody who's in transition, okay, and you find that new opportunity, all right, and the company isn't gonna build an onboarding plan for you, I will work with you to build one. I'll give you an hour or two, you come into my office, and we'll put an onboarding plan together and help you with that, and then you can share that with the hiring manager, okay? So if you got anybody who didn't put their card in here who'd like a shot at meeting with the Overture Group for an hour. All right, go ahead. Okay, let Steve.
That's Steve.
I didn't put my card in.
You need help.
I figure I already know you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, shall I look or read it?
go ahead, then.
That's made it real official.
David Squirrel?
That's me.
David, please. If you have any questions whatsoever, Mike and I are here on a monthly basis. Connect with us on LinkedIn, call us, email us. We're here to help you. We will get back to you.
And this info is all pretty high level
Yeah.
and somewhat dense. So if you ever have specific questions with an opportunity you're working with or when you're hiring,
Call us.
Yeah, just call us.
And all this is from experiences over the years of doing this. These are the things that we've developed, these tools. You know, it just didn't happen overnight, it happened over years and years. Go ahead.
Now, I have one
Please.
thing. Yes, and even when you got going through a search firm like John alluded to 5 years ago, they placed me in my current position. You still need to do your due diligence even when they try to guide the company down the right path. Because I know in hindsight, it's a minute, but I know the question they asked. I know the answer they got was the correct legal answer. And the question was, do you guys have a vacation policy? Well, of course, yes, we have to do. What is it? Here it is, a hand out of the handbook. I can assure you I am the only person in the history of the company that ever had to live by that vacation policy. We wrote it this summer because it made no sense. But if I had done my due diligence, you find out that everybody got, whatever they needed for vacation.
Yeah.
So even when they're doing that, and you know exactly how it went, the companies, I know these speak for my company, they were probably like, you guys are making us go through this, whatever we can do to get through it, to be done, because that's just.
And a lot of companies are like that, and they're very unsophisticated.
Yeah.
That's why you need to take ownership. It's your career, right? You need to take ownership of it and make sure you're taking the proper steps or doing as much due diligence as you can in the process. Own it. It's up to you, because you need to look out for yourself. All right.
Thank you.